Representative Liz Cheney with the state of Wyoming. Good morning, Mrs. Cheney. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
Hey, Vic. Great to be with you. And just listening to the prime rib ad is making me hungry. So good to be on with you.
It is definitely one of the nicest restaurants in town for sure. And I'm sure Ken Barkey, the owner, is going to be glad you said that. All right.
Give him a shout out.
First off, thank you very much for calling in. And I just want to give a disclaimer here. I'm a moderate voter. People that listen to the show know this. I do not believe that there would have that the election was rigged. I don't believe there were enough votes to have changed the way the results were. But I know what a lot of Wyoming voters do believe, and a lot of them are very in favor of Trump. My question is, you are obviously wanting to make sure, as you said, with all the rounds on national television, all the quotes that are out, that your goal is to make sure that President Trump, former President Trump, does not get back into the Oval Office. Can you explain in more detail why you are set to do that?
Well, I agree that, the former president's policies were really good policies for Wyoming. And I voted with him something like 93% of the time, more than almost any other Republican member of the House. And so it's not about his policies, because when it comes to oil and gas, when it comes to coal, when it comes to national security policy generally, there were a whole range of areas, judges, where his policies were absolutely right for the country. But the issue is January 6th and what has happened since the election, and the extent to which, the former president has demonstrated his willingness to, provoke the attack on the Capitol, not to send help when the attack was underway, and continue to claim the election was stolen in a way that really does threaten fundamentally the foundations of the democracy. We've got to have reverence for the Constitution and reverence for the rule of law. And the rule of law, means that there is a way to contest elections. The former president did that. Over 60 different court cases, rejected the claims. Once the Electoral College has met and voted, that's it. That's the end. And the stability and the security and the sanctity of our system requires that we honor that and that we are faithful to the rule of law. And so I think it's really important for us as Republicans to make sure that we can build the kind of coalition that will allow us to get the majority back in 22 and the White House back in 24, because the Biden policies are dangerous for the country. They're certainly bad for us in Wyoming. But if we want to really defeat them, we have to get back voters who left us in 2020, and we have to be very clear about what happened in that election, and we can't be complicit in the kind of lies that the former president is telling about what happened.
All right. Now, obviously, I did a lot of research, reading some interviews, transcripts from all different networks you've been busy with over this past week. You mentioned you were for a commission for January 6th, researching everything that happened and leading up to January 6th, but not BLM and Antifa. Can I get a clarification on you? Are you for a commission on, separately for the Black Lives Matter movement and Antifa with what happened in Portland and Minneapolis and other major cities around the nation?
Absolutely. And I think that if you look at what happened in the riots over the summer, those were devastating. Clearly, there was criminal activity, and the people, BLM and Antifa and other groups who participated have to be held accountable. They ought to be prosecuted. We ought to understand what happened. The issue is we should not mix that with what happened on January 6th. And if you go back to, the attack on Pearl Harbor, after the attack, there was a commission appointed to study how that happened and why. After President Kennedy was assassinated, the Warren Commission was established for the same purpose. After the 9/11 attacks, we had another bipartisan commission. And that's really what we have to have here. I mean, we had an attack on the Capitol. And it was an attack on the Capitol while we were counting the electoral votes. 5 people died. You had an effort to stop the counting. You've never had that kind of a breach of the Capitol in the history of the nation, and certainly since 1812. And the nation, the American people, have to be in a position where we know why that happened. We know what led to it. We know who's to blame, and that commission with that kind of focus should not be diluted by or mixed with anything else. But that isn't to say we shouldn't have, investigations into the riots in the summer at the same time. They just shouldn't be part of one big investigation, one big commission.
All right. I want to ask, why do you believe that the president incited the violence when, at that rally, he said, let's peacefully march down to the Capitol building, let's support the congressmen and congresswomen that are going to vote to go against the Electoral College decision? I haven't seen any quotes of where he said, let's go down there, break some windows, march into the Senate chamber, march into the House of Representatives chamber, and cause problems, of course. Why do you think he still incited the violence to cause everything that happened?
Well, I think if you go back and look at all of his statements really since Election Day and the extent to which he was using language like the normal rules don't apply, you have to take action that's, out of the ordinary, you have to fight like hell. There was a whole series of statements that he was making, and you can look at what a number of the people who've been arrested said in court. We've had hundreds of people arrested now who breached the Capitol, and many of them have said we were there because the president told us to be there. So you've got the whole issue of the provocation of the violence. He made people believe the election was stolen, and he made people believe that they could change things on January 6th, which they couldn't. And he told people that the normal rules of behavior don't apply, and you got to fight like hell, and get rid of people like Mike Pence and me. But the other issue then is what he failed to do when the attack was underway, and that's undisputed. So once the mob had breached the Capitol, members of Congress were calling him and pleading with him to send help, pleading with him to stop the attack, and he refused to do so. And that in and of itself was impeachable. The idea that the commander-in-chief, the president of the United States, when the Capitol of the United States and the Congress is under attack, won't send help, that's a fundamental violation of his duty and of his oath of office.
On the other end of the spectrum, though, there were reports coming out that the now former Capitol Police Chief, before everything happened, he wanted more additional help and support to be prepared. Apparently, the Sergeant of Arms, I believe in both chambers, wouldn't let that happen. Is that the truth? And if so, should there be a commission based on, in part, looking at that if the Capitol Police Chief was trying to get stuff set up, knowing that it could be what happened on January 6th could have been prevented ahead of time?
Yeah, that's exactly the reason why we need to have a commission. We need to know exactly what happened. And there are other elements of this. We had pipe bombs that were placed a few blocks away from the Capitol at the DNC and the NRCC, probably for some sort of effort to, divert attention there. You had a delay in getting the National Guard to the Capitol. You had, just unbelievably intense hand-to-hand combat. Anybody who hasn't ought to look up Officer Fanone, who's a member of the Metropolitan Police Department. His body cam footage was just released about 24 hours ago. Anybody who's under the mistaken impression, as some of my colleagues have said, that this was a normal day of tours, I urge you to watch Officer Fanone's body cam. This was an assault on the Capitol. It was unbelievably intense hand-to-hand combat with people who were there to do damage, to do violence, to try to stop the counting of electoral votes, looking for the vice president. It's the kind of thing that can never happen again, and we need to understand every element of why it did happen this time.
All right, I've asked listeners to send in emails for questions they would like to know. One says, what made you decide that your personal feelings were more important than the majority of the people in Wyoming that elected you, and how can you justify what is happening now as compared to how well things were going under President Trump? Wyoming really wants to know just why you betrayed us. A question from a listener, and I think from the feedback I'm getting from my listeners on this station, and maybe across the whole state, that's a common feeling and theme there. What do you have to respond in preparation for a re-election bid for you in 2022?
Yeah, listen, I really appreciate it when people ask that question, because I think that is the heart of the issues that we're dealing with. And what I would say is that this is about my oath to the Constitution. And that's an oath that all of us take. It's an oath we swear before God. And it is an oath that doesn't bend to partisanship or to party politics. And as I said, this is not about policy. The policies of the Trump administration were much better for Wyoming than President Biden's policies are. President Biden's policies are dangerous, and we've got to stop them. But we don't live in a country where you say we are going to ignore the results of an election. We're going to provoke an attack on the Capitol in order to keep in power a person because we like their policies. That's not America. And I've spent a lot of time in my career working in countries around the world where violence determines who leads. And that can never be America. We have to obey our oath to the Constitution, especially when it goes against our own political belief, our own party. And I would ask listeners if a Democratic president, Barack Obama, had been responsible for the things Donald Trump was responsible for since the election, not conceding, provoking an attack on the Capitol, continuing to say the election was stolen and the system is rigged. If Barack Obama were doing this, people need to say, how would we respond to that? And our duty to the Constitution is one that's got to be above politics. I know that people of Wyoming, we supported President Trump with a larger margin than any other state in the country because of his policies. And in my view, January 6th changed everything. It's a line that can never be crossed. And that's, I believe, my obligation. And I think the voters of Wyoming know how important it is to be faithful to the Constitution. So we have the Constitution to protect us against the kind of massive overreach that we too often see from the Democrats.
Well, I've said on the show numerous times with my listeners that I give you credit for not wavering on your view on what happened on January 6th. Are you willing to fall on your sword, for lack of a better term, to prevent the president from getting into the White House or Oval Office down the road, if that means that you are also really handicapping your chance of winning in 2022 as the re-election bid for the Wyoming at-large representative seat?
Well, I don't think that those are mutually exclusive. I think that as a party, we've got to be a party that's based on ideals and that's based on fidelity to the Constitution, that fights for what's right. And I think that it's really important for us to not let ourselves become a party of lies, not let ourselves become a party that embraces insurrection. I think that, when you look at 2024, certainly I've been clear that the, former president's actions disqualify him. Those are the kinds of things that no president can ever do. And because we know that he's willing to undertake that kind of activity, that makes him unfit for office. And so it's really important for us as a country to make sure that we're defending the foundations of the Republic and that we're defending them in a way that the voters of Wyoming have always believed so strongly in. So I have real confidence and faith in the people of Wyoming and in their determination that, if you decide that we're going to look away from the Constitution, you're going down a path that is ultimately going to lead to the destruction of the Republic. And, if you look just at what happened on January 6th, even before the attack, if I had voted to object to the electoral votes of any of those states, we would be setting up a tyranny of Congress, a situation where Nancy Pelosi could decide she didn't like Wyoming's Republican electors. That's not what our founders intended, and it doesn't safeguard our rights. So I'm going to be very committed to continuing to talk to and hear from and work with voters all across the state as we get into 2022 to running what I'm sure will be a spirited race and earning every single vote as the candidate that's always going to defend the Constitution and do what's right for the voters of Wyoming.
Final question for you. There are rumors that you might run for president in 2024. What's your official statement there?
I am absolutely committed to serving the people of Wyoming. I'm firmly committed to seeking re-election in Wyoming and completely focused on that and focused on what we have to do to get back voters across the country left us in 2020 so that we can get the Republican majority back. Ultimately, the best thing for us in Wyoming is to have Republicans in charge in Washington. And that's what I'm going to be fighting to do and fighting to make sure we can get those majorities back to 22.
Once again, at-large Representative Liz Cheney, representing the state of Wyoming, talking with us. Thank you for spending some time with us this morning, Representative Cheney.